好的，大家现在可以看到我的屏幕哈。今天的讲座的话呢，我们就正式的开始了。在讲座的开始之前的话呢，还是照例用大概5分钟的时间，我会简短的介绍一下 AFI 以及 IvyCompass。好的，相信今晚的各位观众的话呢，对我们的 AFI 已经是比较了解了。AFI 的话呢，是全美影响力最大的华人在线社群之一。我们呢是致力于推动华人之间的信息与资源互通，从而整体的提高华人社群在美国的社会地位以及影响力。我们每周的话呢，都会举行多场的公益线上讲座，截止目前为止呢，已经是举行了超过400场讲座，我们的观众累计人数呢，也是达到了数十万人。目前的话呢 ，AFI 影响力联合会，我们分设了几个固定的栏目，包括影响力人物访谈、谈古论今讲座、教育讲座、升学讲座，以及我们简称 TCPC 亲子学院，还有我们的这个云健身和这个种花种菜以及休闲的这一个平台哈。此外的话呢，我还要特别的提到，我们由华二代独立运营的青少年的创业创新及财商投资普及公益组织 AFI。这一个组织的话呢，是由我们的非常优秀的华二代他们独立运营，所以的您的孩子如果想要加入这一个机构，得到更多的这一个 volunteer 的机会的话呢，一会儿的话呢，您可以联系我，我可以把您邀请进相应的这个微信群了解详情。更多的信息的话呢，您可以加入我们的 AFI 的微信群。此外的话呢，您也可以登录我们的网站 www.AFI-IvyCompass升学一会儿我会打在 chat box 里面了解更多的详情。好的，现在的话呢，我介绍一下 IvyCompass。IvyCompass 的话呢，中文名叫做指南针教育咨询，是致力于将北美口碑最好的前藤校招生官、独立升学顾问、艺术以及音乐作品集的辅导，还有课程及竞赛辅导等稀缺的教育资源，对接给全球的华人家长。IvyCompass 的话呢，我们把它称为是升学资源的 Costco。我们呢是专注于挖掘优质的升学资源，从而的话呢，帮助华人家长进行一个最初步的一个把关。IvyCompass 的几个特点呢，包括第一，IvyCompass 会严格的控制学生的数量，我们只推的是精品的升学导师以及项目。以这样的一个方式的话呢，我们才能是真正的是帮助到我们的学生。第二的话呢，IvyCompass 的话呢，采取的是垂直式的一个服务模式，我们确保呢家长可以全程的掌握升学的进程，您所选的顾问呢将直接负责学生所有的升学需求。中途的话呢，不会出现更换顾问的这么一个情况哈。此外的话呢，每个学生除了升学导师之外，我们还会为他匹配一个1对1的升学进程的监督顾问。这样的话呢，可以确保我们的家长全程的掌握孩子的一个升学的进程。第三的话呢，IvyCompass 与 AFI 的话呢，是一个独家战略合作的这么一个伙伴关系，所以呢 ，IvyCompass 的学生呢是有机会得到更多的这一个志愿者和社区服务的这样的一个机会和资源哈。在过去的这么一个申请季呢，IvyCompass 的顾问呢，帮助我们的学生进入到了大家可以看到哈，屏幕上的以下的诸多的名校，包括哈佛、普林斯顿、斯坦福、芝加哥大学、沃顿商学院，还有宾大、康奈尔、卡内基梅隆以及这个加州理工等等。IvyCompass 我们提供的服务呢是以这个升学咨询为这个主体哈，另外的话呢还有这个独家的这一个背景提升，包括这个科研项目以及竞赛的辅导、艺术及作品集的这一个音乐作品集的辅导。此外的话呢，我们还有非常好的合作伙伴为我们提供这个 ACT 等标化成绩的辅导。以及我们的 AP 和 IB 课程，更多的这个详情的话呢，一会儿您可以加我们的小助手了解。好的，在这里的话呢，是我们的联系方式，欢迎您扫码来加我们的小助手，以及关注我们的微信公众号。好的，现在的话呢，我们就正式的进入今天的讲座主体哈。今晚的话呢，我们的这一个讲座的 main topic 是关于 supplemental essays。我在这一个就是和我们的学生还家长的工作过程里面的话呢，很多的家长会问到我说，今年的这一个很多的名校，他们其实是有在修改他们的附加文书的题目的。特别是因为我们的这个7月份哈，最高法院是通过了这一个禁止这个平权法案的这么一个措施哈。那其实在此之后的话呢，包括哈佛在内，他们的这一个附加文书的题目里面呢，都有增加询问学生背景的这么一个额外的一个题目。所以很多的家长的话呢，也是很关心哈，说怎么样就是说在这一个文书里面呢，怎么样是全面的体现，特别是我们华裔学生的这么一个优势和特点。所以呢，今天的话呢，我们特别请到了资深的这个文书顾问 Arienne Noble， 他会来给我们讲解一下今年的这一个各名校的附加文书的最新变化。好的，Arienne，now I will give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Just share my screen here. Get back to just give me where was the full screen?
It's supposed to be under the slideshow. The slideshow.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second. Plus. Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
There?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I hope that everyone's school year is off to a good start and that you've all been making progress on your college applications. I know it's a lot of work, especially now that your courses have started up again at school. Last summer, I spoke about writing your personal statement, otherwise known as the Common Application Essay. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the supplemental essays. Almost every college that you're likely to apply to is going to require additional essays as part of its writing supplement. Because each college has its own list of prompts, it's impossible for me to cover everything that is going to come up for you people. So I'm going to try to focus on advice that I hope will be helpful for almost all of you. And I'm going to leave a lot of time at the end for specific questions. So first thing I wanted to talk about is what's new this year. Most of you are probably aware of the Supreme Court's decision last summer, which struck down affirmative action in college admissions. While that decision is causing a lot of upheaval and concern at colleges across the country, it doesn't change an awful lot about your job as a college applicant. The colleges are still committed to enrolling diverse student bodies, and they're going to find ways to make that happen. But in order to comply with ruling, a lot of the colleges have created new prompts this year for the supplemental essays. In addition to simply rewriting the prompts, many of the schools have actually added to the number of essays that they're requiring. This is one of those good news, bad news situations. The bad news is you have more work to do this year than last year's applicants. The good news is that the more essays means you have more opportunities to show admissions officers who you really are. So take advantage of that. It's not like you have a choice about it, but it can be a positive thing. So although each school has its own prompts, if you're applying to a number of colleges, you're going to see a fair bit of overlap among the prompts. So I wanted to talk about some of the most common prompts. Two of the most common prompts that I want to mention are not new. They've been around forever and they continue to be. So why this major is a particularly common prompt and why this college? Those are actually among the easiest supplemental essay prompts to answer, and we'll talk about those more in a minute. The third prompt that I wanted to talk about tonight is the one that we're seeing more and more colleges around the country, and this is the one that involves discussing your community or experiences that have shaped you in some way. This prompt sometimes focuses on collaboration, and many of the variations of this prompt ask how the student will contribute to their college campus.
Hello, Arienne. So somebody said they cannot hear like your voice clearly. So the voice is not feeling clearly. So do you think, I mean, that's a problem with the microphone, or that's
I think it's got to be a connection issue, because it's when I'm speaking, to just you or anyone else in the one-on-one things, that's not a problem, and it's like right in front of me.
A voice sounds clearly to me, so I don't know. So maybe it's like echo or something. I mean, yeah, you can let's try. Yeah. Somebody said it's an echo in the background. So somebody said, so it's a half. So maybe maybe it's a connecting issue. I'm not sure. So, but let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's take a few minutes to talk about each of these prompts. So probably one of the most common ones is why this major. Some students have a clear idea of what they want to study in college. And if that's you, then this question should be pretty easy to answer. If it's not easy for you to articulate the reasons why you want to pursue your chosen major, then it's time for you to do some serious soul searching and figure that out. Other students don't know what they want to major in, or are undecided between several options. If that's the situation you're in, don't worry. However, even if you're not sure what you want to major in, pick one or two of the fields that you might want to study and write about those. The thing to remember is that whatever you write in the essay is not a commitment. You can change your mind later, but it's helpful for admissions officers to have some idea where you might end up on their campus. For those of you who are undecided, think about the types of things that interest you most at school and outside of school, and look over the list of academic programs and departments and courses at the school that you're applying to, and choose something that they offer. There's no point saying that you're interested in, for example, oceanography, if you're applying to a college that doesn't offer that. So make sure whatever you do decide to write about lines up with something that's offered at that particular college. Once you know what field you're going to write about, think about how your interest in that field evolved. How did you first become interested in it? What things have heightened your interest? What steps have you taken to explore this field? Do you have any particular career goals that would be served by a degree with this major? So you want to connect the major that you're interested in to your long-term goals, and be as specific as you can about what those goals are. Again, it's not a commitment, but it's helpful for admissions officers if they have a clearer idea of the type of career that you're hoping to have. The one thing that I would caution you is that when you're explaining what major you're interested in pursuing, do not say that you're interested in a particular major because it will lead to a high-paying job, or because you've heard that this field has the best employment prospects. Even if those are actually your reasons, they're not going to be very persuasive to admissions officers. So find something else to explain your interest in that field. Okay, let's talk about the why this college essay. I think of this essay as almost the opposite of your personal statement. If the goal of your personal statement is to get...
Arienne,
yes.
Maybe you can back off a little bit, so adjust maybe your position to the microphone.
All right, you think if it's better farther away, that's fine. It was just last time people weren't hearing me, so I was trying to be closer. But if you think it's farther away is better, that's great.
So did you use you use the same microphone as the last time you did the webinar? The same microphone? It's a new microphone. Yeah.
Yes, and it has been working very well. It all works great one-on-one. I only seem to have problems when we have, which is why I feel it's a connection issue.
It's a connecting issue. I'm not sure, but can you maybe a little bit far away from the microphone? Maybe that's gonna help to reduce the echo.
Okay, is this better?
And someone recommend if you remove the microphone and talk directly to the computer.
Well, I'm happy to give that a try.
Yeah, let's give it a try. Yeah.
All right, let's try it.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you still hear me?
So
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me know if this is better.
I think there's no difference, like no make sure the correct input device is selected. It's probably the inbuilt computer microphone is being used instead of the actual dedicated microphone in the Zoom setting. Yeah, maybe, yeah, because after you plug off the microphone, your voice sounds the same.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically maybe the microphone did not work at the beginning. So it's the inbuilt audio from the computer.
No, it was using the external one. I think, as I said, I feel like it's a connection thing.
Now it is a little bit clearly. Yeah.
Do you want me to just leave it the way it is now?
They said it's pretty clear. Okay, so let's keep going. Yeah, let's just do it
this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think now we're gathered. Yeah.
Okay, so for the why this college essay, if your personal statement is the essay that's going to persuade admissions officers to fall in love with you, your answer to why this college is going to explain to admissions officers why you're in love with them. So think of it that way. How do you do that? Well, the most important thing is to do your research, lots of research. You need to learn everything you can about the college. Look for the specific programs, courses, professors, activities, or other special features that make that particular college perfect for you. Do not write about external characteristics. Don't write about how you want to go to college in the greater Boston area, or the school of a particular size, or its prestige or ranking. Those are not the sorts of things that are going to be persuasive. Nobody wants to be loved for things that are not unique to them. And if you're saying, you know, oh, I always wanted to go to school in the Boston area, but that doesn't explain why you would want to go to Harvard versus MIT versus Boston University or Northeastern or anywhere else. So you have to really focus in on the characteristics and the things for features of each particular college. Try not to sound like the college's brochure. You're not writing a brochure. And you don't need to tell admissions officers about their schools. They already know what's great about their college. However, when you're talking about the specific things that you found through your research that make the school a good fit for you, you want to make sure to connect those things to your own particular values, interests, and goals, because you want to explain not just why it's a great college, but why it's the perfect fit for you. Okay, the next prompt that I wanted to talk about are the community and experiences ones. And there are numerous variations of this. These are mostly rewritten this year because of the case that we talked about. So I'm just going to read you a couple of them. Harvard now asks, Harvard has long recognized the importance of enrolling a diverse student body. How will the life experiences that shape who you are today enable you to contribute to Harvard? Another one comes from Columbia. The hallmark of the Columbia experience is being able to learn and thrive in an equitable and inclusive community with a wide range of perspectives. Tell us about an aspect of your own perspective, viewpoint, or lived experience that is important to you, and describe how it has shaped the way you would learn from and contribute to Columbia's diverse and collaborative community. And just one more here, because it's a particularly helpful one. From the University of Michigan. Everyone belongs to many different communities and or groups defined by, among other things, shared geography, religion, ethnicity, income, cuisine, interest, race, ideology, or intellectual heritage. Choose one of the communities to which you belong and describe that community and your place within it. Okay, so how should you go about answering these prompts? What I want you to think about the term community in its broadest sense. So just like the Michigan prompt, that was they've really given you a big hint here. Think about community in the broadest sense. Your community can be based on many different things. It can be related to the place where you live, which may be the particular city or region of the country, or it could be the type of place. Do you live in an urban area or a rural area? Is it agricultural or industrial on the coast? It can be related to your family background. And that's not just race and ethnicity. It could be large, you come from a large family or a small one. Do you have a multi-generational household? Or are you adopted? I mean, there are many different things that family can relate to as well. Interests and activities, identity. Groups can be based on all sorts of different things. So I want you to spend some time when you're answering this, thinking about all the different communities that you're a part of. Think about what impact those communities have had on you, in what ways they shaped you. And then think about what impact you've had on those communities, because many of these prompts are also asked for how you're going to contribute to the community. When you're thinking about your impact on the community, you can think about your roles in various communities. How do you fit in? A lot of students focus on trying to show their leadership because they think that leadership is the essential character trait that colleges are looking for. And I want to challenge that idea. Leadership is great, but it's not the only characteristic or trait in a group that matters. If you think about communities and groups, and you try and imagine a group of all leaders, well, how well do you think that's going to work? Probably not very well. Just like in everything else, you need diversity in all things in order to have productive groups that can make things happen. So what other roles might you have as opposed to just being the leader? You could be the visionary who comes up with ideas. Maybe you're the detail person or the organizer who helps bring these ideas to fruition. Maybe you're the motivator who gets people excited about the project. Maybe you're the peacemaker or the problem solver who resolves disputes among people and helps everyone get along. So think about the sorts of roles that you have when you were working and interacting with a group of people, and what sorts of roles do you naturally gravitate towards. It's not about pretending to be a leader if that's not what you really are, but think about the roles you'd like to have and the ways you'd like to contribute. The final thing I want to say about these prompts is to read them carefully. Although they're covering a lot of the same ground, they often have multiple questions wrapped up into the one prompt, and you have to be sure that you're actually answering the particular questions that the college is asking. So read all of the prompts carefully. And this is especially important if you're trying to reuse an essay that you've written for one college and you want to use it for another college as well. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but be very careful that you're looking at the wording and making sure that you've actually answered the question that's being asked. So since you're going to be faced with an awful lot of supplemental essays to write for these colleges, I know that you're all extremely busy, even without all of the extra work for your college applications. So if you approach these essays in an efficient manner, you might be able to save yourself some time. Can't promise it's going to be a huge time savings, because the bottom line is that the application process is very time consuming, but you want to try and do it as efficiently as possible. So I would start by making a master list of all of the prompts that you have to answer for the schools that you're going to apply to. You want to look for overlapping prompts and see where you can write one essay that might be able to be used for more than one school. Start with the schools that have your earliest deadlines, particularly if you're applying anywhere early decision or early action. If all of your deadlines are around the same time, then I would focus on the ones that have overlapping prompts and start with those ones first. Where the questions do overlap, you can often revise an essay and use it more than once. But as I said just a minute ago, you have to be extremely careful that you're actually answering the particular prompts for each school. So make sure that you reread the prompts carefully anytime you decide to recycle an essay. And the word counts may vary as well. So you want to be super careful that you're making sure each essay fits what's required for that particular application. The one essay that you should never try to recycle is why this college. You cannot simply just put in the same basic ideas and change the name. You need to start those essays from scratch for each new college, so they will actually sound like you're genuinely excited and enthusiastic about each one. So as you're thinking about all of your supplemental essays, it's also important to keep in mind the big picture that your application is painting. It's important that you try not to repeat information in the essays that's covered elsewhere in your application. Doesn't mean that you can't sometimes mention things, but you don't want to repeat so much stuff that the admissions officer is already familiar with. Try to tell them something new at each opportunity. You also want to make sure that the parts of your application complement each other rather than conflicting. So if you're applying to be a computer science major, don't write your personal statement about your passion for studying history. That's something like that would just make them wonder, well, okay, if that's his interest, then why is he applying for this other major? So you want to make sure that you're showing parts of something that actually can add up to a cohesive whole that will make sense. Use the supplemental essays to show the admissions officers other sides of your personality that they would not be able to see from the other information that's in your application. So things that maybe weren't mentioned, or you didn't get any detail in your description of activities or other interests, or maybe it's something that you didn't mention at all. One question that students often ask is whether optional essays are really optional. The answer is yes and no. It kind of depends on the circumstances. While you won't ever be penalized for not submitting an essay that's listed as optional, it can be a disadvantage. So, for example, there are some colleges that don't have any required supplemental essays, but they have optional ones, and NYU is an example of this. But in a case like that, where the college hasn't asked for any other supplemental essays, if you don't submit one, you're missing one of the very few opportunities to tell them something more about you. So if the only thing they're reading is the Common App essay, you're really missing a big chance. So in that case, I would definitely recommend writing the optional essay. The flip side of that, though, is that there are other colleges that have a lot of required essays and then also have optional ones. Just because there is an optional essay doesn't mean you should answer it. You should only answer an optional essay prompt if it's going to add something important to your application that the admissions officers don't already know. So really think about that. More information isn't always better. What it does is admissions officers have a limited amount of time. And the more that you want to make sure that everything that they're looking at in your application is important and is helping your application. So submitting an extra essay about something that's not really that important to you, or that's not as well written or compelling, isn't going to help. It's just going to take time away from the stronger parts of your application. So if there are a lot of essays already, don't think that just because they have another optional question that you really need to answer. You don't. Okay, the final thing that I wanted to talk about before we get to questions, and I assume there'll be lots because there are so many different prompts, are some of the more common mistakes that students make in answering the supplemental essay questions. The first mistake that I see very frequently is that students try to write these essays as if they were personal statements. So they want to include lengthy anecdotes and description and even dialogue. That's most of the time, that's simply not going to work because the supplemental essays tend to have much shorter word counts. and there just isn't enough space. If you fill it up with description and dialogue, that's just giving you less room to actually give the answers to the questions that they're asking. So you definitely want to include interesting details whenever you can, but you can't use the creative touches that people usually want to try and get in a personal statement. For the same reason, you can't really include a lot of background information. It's much more important that you get right to the point and make sure that you answer the questions that they're asking. And that, in fact, is one of the other main mistakes that students make, is that they don't read the questions carefully enough, and they don't actually answer the prompt directly, or they answer only part of it and not another part of it. You have very little space in most of these essays, so you really need to make sure that you're covering everything they asked. It's not a creative writing assignment. They want your answers. Okay, so a few other quick things that I'm sure you already know and that I've mentioned tonight and on other occasions. Don't repeat information. Don't tell the admissions officers things that they already know about their own programs. Try not to focus on accomplishments, because like the personal statement, the goal is for them to learn more about you as a person, all of the different sides, but they will already know about most of your accomplishments from elsewhere in your application. And try not to be too formal. It's not an academic essay. They really want to get to know who you are as a person. So if you want to use humor and language that's more like how you would really speak, feel free to do that. You can use contractions. It's not an academic essay. So try to be yourself, as if you were writing to somebody your age, somebody who is a friend. Okay, those were the things that I wanted to cover. I suspect that people have many questions. If you want to let me know what questions to answer, Allison, we'll be happy to discuss whatever people would like to talk about.
Oh, okay. So let me switch to my PowerPoint, and I will show you how to join the IvyCompass community. Wait a second. So we will release the replay of the webinars in our WeChat groups. So you can, so basically you see 2 QR codes over there, right? So one is for 小助手, IvyCompass WeChat assistant. Another one, if you want to have the inquiry meeting with Arienne about your assets, your personal statement, your supplemental assets, please also scan the QR code on the right side. So you will need to fill a very simple form to let us know about your students, your kids, and then we will help you to schedule a free inquiry meeting with Arienne. So basically, there's 2 QR codes. The left one, join the community, and the right one, schedule the free inquiry meeting with Arienne. Okay, so Arienne, let's jump to the QA session. So, okay. So somebody asked, can I get a copy of the slideshow? Unfortunately, it's the copyright from Arienne, but if you listen to our replay, you definitely can see every slide of the PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay. The first question I want to mention is that, what do you think about using ChatGPT to help build an essay? I think you get this question a lot.
I don't know that any colleges have specifically forbidden it at this point, but I feel like it's probably not as useful as people think it will be. The bigger issue, I think, is coming up with the right content to put in your answers. And if you have that, I don't know. I also feel like, although ChatGPT has uses and can probably write a nice, coherent, and grammatically correct answer, in these application essays, admissions officers want your personality and your voice, and that's not something that these programs are going to be able to do. So I don't think that in the end it would actually save you that much time, and I don't think that the net result would be any better, and possibly worse.
Okay, so but for some kids, like for some students, they probably have hard time finding the inspiration, right? They don't know where to start. Do you think like they can, actually use ChatGPT wisely to actually, help them to get inspired, or how
I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
Is it actually useful for brainstorming? That I don't know. I'm not sure how it would do that. I mean, you'd have to, because you have to input the information and then it's going to spit something back out for you. It's not like it's going to know all of your particular personality traits and interests and quirks unless you've told it. And if you've already gone to the trouble of putting that information in, then I don't know that it's going to add anything for you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I have another question, and then so basically, how students, how students should do brainstorming, or or how you help students to do brainstorming. I think that's the difficult part, right?
Yeah, I think it is too. Although brainstorming is much more of an issue for the personal statement, because it has to cover so much more. And you're trying to find the perfect way to showcase who you are. So, and with the personal statement, it's so open-ended. You can write about anything. So brainstorming is much more of an issue with that piece. And I have a particular system. I work with students to find the most, compelling topics for their personal statements. I don't know how many of your students are still struggling with that. For the supplemental essays, there's less brainstorming, usually because the questions are more direct. They're usually asking you very specific things, like, why do you want to study the things you want to study? How are you going to contribute to our campus? Even if it's like the question about what would you tell your roommate? I mean, they usually have very specific questions that don't involve brainstorming in the same way that you have to for the personal statement.
Okay. Okay. So I will pick the questions. We will pick the questions most related to supplemental essays and the personal statement. And then if we have more time, we can maybe answer other questions, about college application in general. Okay. Sure. So the next question is: every college require supplemental essay? If not, is there any online website list which universities need supplemental essays and their prompts?
They do not all require supplemental essays. In general, most of the highly selective schools do. And as they get less selective, they're less likely to require supplemental essays. I don't know if there's a website that actually says which ones, but you could certainly Google that, which colleges do not require supplemental essays, and see. There are probably many. The question is, are there many that are colleges you're interested in applying to? And I suspect the vast majority of the schools that students here are going to be interested in will have supplemental essays.
Okay, so I mean, if the supplemental essays are optional, do you recommend students still write something and submit, or?
Well, as I was saying a little earlier, it really depends. So in the case of NYU, where they don't have any other required essays, they only have the optional essay, I would definitely encourage students to write it, because otherwise the only essay that NYU is going to have to look at is the personal statement. But there are other colleges that have many essays, and then on top of the required ones, they're also asking, they have optional ones. I would not answer optional essays when you've already written several, unless there's something really important to add that you haven't already covered. Just because there's a chance to submit more information doesn't mean you should, because more isn't always better. But in the NYU situation, where you haven't submitted a whole bunch of information already, it would be a shame to pass up the opportunity. Okay. So it depends on how much you've written.
Okay. So, next question from John. He was wondering what is a good strategy to research a college for the why college essay. as navigating the sitemap is pretty time consuming.
It is. I mean, a lot of these colleges have extremely extensive websites. So one thing you want to make sure that you're looking at is the overall mission and values of the college. So you can usually get to that from the main page. They'll talk about their history and their values and their mission. That's particularly important if you're applying to any of the Quaker schools or any of the Jesuit schools, or even some of the particular liberal arts colleges that have very specific values and missions. You want to make sure you've read that carefully. Then you want to look carefully at the particular academic areas that you might be interested in. So if you're interested in engineering, you don't have to pore over everything to do with arts and sciences or something, something like that. But the academic areas that you're interested in, you do really need to look deeply into as many pages on the website as you can. Looking at their descriptions, if you can find lists, if they have the list of courses, the professors that might be doing research in some area that interests you. I would also look at special programs. A lot of colleges have interdisciplinary programs or internship opportunities, maybe like speaker series, various clubs. You want to look at all sorts of things. Some colleges also have their living arrangements are particularly, they're one of their features, like they have residential colleges, and that might be a particular aspect of the school that's appealing to you. It is time consuming, but you're trying to, it's an important decision. If we were talking about, your future spouse, you would, or somebody you're going to date, you would take a lot of time to get to know them. And you're thinking of spending 4 years at this institution. So it's worth taking the time to learn as much as you can about it. If you have the opportunity to actually go visit on campus and take the tour, or even like online, if you don't have time to go, most of these schools now also have online tours and programs that you can sign up for. And it's worth doing that because if you listen to their presentations, they'll tell you what's important to them and what their values are. But there really isn't a shortcut. You need to do the homework. Obviously start with the schools that you think you're most interested in, but take the time and really learn as much as you can.
Okay, so the next question from Davey Lin. So basically we know some questions are very subjective, like top 3 things your roommate might like you to know about you. So basically it's some questions, maybe there's no right or wrong answers. So what's your strategy to answer those type of questions? Is there a correct way to answer these type of questions?
I think even that there isn't, the only strategy is to be yourself, because that's what's important. And I think colleges can tell when you're saying things that you think you're saying what you think they want to hear, and that's not going to be persuasive. All of these schools, they want to know who you really are, and it's not going to sound convincing when you're trying to sound like the ideal roommate or whatever it is. And it's also not memorable. You could, let's say for the roommate question, you might think they want everybody to be like organized and neat and, keep good hours and not party too much or whatever. But that's going to be a very boring answer. They're not going to remember that. If you say, well, no, what I really like to do is, order insomnia cookies, twice a week at midnight, it's going to be more memorable. So what you should not be trying to strategize about so much about everything. At the end of the day, what you want is a good match. And if you have to pretend to be somebody you're not to try to persuade them to accept you, then maybe it's just not the right place for you. And it goes both ways, right? So you want to find a school where you're going to be happy with them and they're going to be happy with you. So I would worry less about strategizing and more about just showing who you really are.
Or maybe being creative, so make you more memorable.
I don't think you should make it up. I mean, you can think about, there are lots of things that people don't think about using in their answers. but I wouldn't make it up. I think you can usually tell when people are trying to be interesting or trying to be impressive. I think you just need to think about, like ask your friends, what would your friends say? If you said, well, would you want to be my roommate, or why not? Like, what do you think would be fun about being my roommate? Ask somebody who's your age.
Okay. So next question. Yeah, I really like this question. So basically, you mentioned it's not a personal statement. It's not too formal. So they are looking for personality or my own voice. How to keep a balance of essay while standing out at the same time?
All of the application essays are not formal. So the personal statement and the supplemental essays. I think the supplemental essays are less creative, so you have to be a bit more direct in your answers for those. So sorry, what was the second bit of your question in there?
So I guess like they want to ask, so like how to how to keep a balance of essays, but still like standing out.
I mean, I think really what it takes to stand out, I think the more you think about the questions deeply and know your own values deeply, the easier it is to give memorable answers, because you don't want to just give the canned answers of the, oh yes, this is what I want to do. Really give some serious thought to to why you are the way you are. You would say that you're interested in business or computer science or whatever it may be. Well, why is that? I mean, maybe you've been thinking about this since you were 10 years old, but why? And what is it about doing those things that really gets you excited? It takes a little bit of digging. I feel like a lot of high school students will have answers to things, but they're just the quick and easy answer that only scratches the surface, and they haven't really dug down and to figure out the answers underneath. Why are they the way they are? What is it about your family and your environment in your school? How have they impacted you and shaped you into the person you are today? And that takes some thinking. So I feel like the key thing is to think about these things more deeply. And as you do that, I think it'll be easier to be more sincere and authentic in your answers. And yeah, I mean, and then you're less likely to give the same answer as everybody else. But I think it takes some serious thought. You can't just, write this off in one draft after having thought about it for 20 minutes.
So basically, in short, all schools, all universities, they love deep thinkers.
I think you could probably. I mean, it's always better. I mean, college education involves a lot of thinking and discussing and interacting with people. So, yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Okay. So next question: it's good to do name dropping for why school, why major essays? What
kind of? I guess what do they mean by name dropping?
Yeah.
If you're trying to say, okay, so if we mean name dropping, like, oh yes, my next door neighbor is, Neil deGrasse Tyson, no, I wouldn't do that. But if you mean, mentioning the professors at the school whose research you really admire and whom you would like to, work with, and you'd love to be their lab assistant, sure, absolutely. That tends to come up a bit more in the why this college essay, but if you're doing why this major and you're really fascinated by some particular person's research or work, you could certainly mention that. Absolutely. I mean, it's useful to show that you have some very specific knowledge, and a narrower interest is better than a broad interest. So instead of just saying I like physics, narrow it down to what specific thing in physics really gets you excited. Is it black holes? Is it, what's going on with the Webb telescope? Is it pick some very specific areas that are interesting to you? And no matter what it is, whether it's business or computer science or, history or whatever, the more specific and narrow your interest, the easier it will be to be memorable.
Okay, so the next question, would you not recommend any creative storytelling writing styles for all supplemental essays, or we should do, or students should do some storytelling to be more interesting?
I think it's very hard to do creative storytelling in the supplemental essays because they are so short. And it's more important to answer the question. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try and write it as eloquently as you can. But I would be very sparing with scenes or description. You can tell some stories, but they're going to have to be super condensed. I can rarely imagine any situation where you would want to put dialogue in there because you just don't have the space. So if you have an anecdote in mind that you might have used for a personal statement or something, you're going to have to condense it to a much smaller, more compact version than it would have been in the personal statement. Okay. So if you want to be creative, the creative storytelling is easier to do in the personal statement.
Okay. The next question. So when answer why major questions, parents in the industry will be a good reason to say
no. No. Well, and I know that that's actually a major reason why a lot of people pursue a major. It's okay to say that you have a parent that's already in that, but only in the sense that if you're explaining that you were exposed to this at an early age because your father or mother was working on this project and you got to see it or learn a lot about it and you were captivated by that. So obviously if your parent works in the field, you have more exposure to it than somebody else. Or let's say your parent was a physician. Well, maybe you spent time in the hospital with them and, that had a big impact on you. You can explain it that way, but it's not enough to say, yes, my parents are in real estate, so I think I'm going to go into this as well.
Okay. The next question. So can you talk about a little bit about how students should start with the personal statement process, how they started? Because sometimes I know students, they sit there for a long time and cannot really even take action, just get stuck. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, the personal statement is much more difficult than the supplemental essays. If anybody has October or November 1 deadlines, they really need to get going on that. I usually have students start with a questionnaire to cover all sorts of topics because you really have to think about all sorts of things to find the ones that are going to be most useful. But at the end, it's about soul searching, knowing what kind of a person are you? What things are you interested in? Why did you turn into the person that you are, and where do you want to go with that? I think it's helpful. I mean, I would suggest actually that if you still have the personal statement webinar online, that might be a good place to start, because I had more specific advice on brainstorming, which is not at the top of my head now because I've been thinking about this. But I would maybe go back and listen to that, and hopefully that gives people some hints on how they can brainstorm and try and what sorts of things they're looking for when they're brainstorming. Because the personal statement is difficult and there's a lot of pressure to come up with this great essay. And it's not always what students think it's going to be. So I would say start there.
Okay, so I just want to add some questions. So basically, do you think if they really get stuck, by simply just answer one of the prompt question can actually help? So
yeah, I mean, the prompts can be useful to encourage brainstorming, because some of them you're going to read and think, I have nothing to say about this. You won't be able to think of an answer. Other ones you might have several things that come to mind. So they can definitely help the brainstorming process. And to be honest, like if they're still at that stage now and they have upcoming deadlines, you know, you've got to get something written. So if that's the way to get started, then it's worth doing that. So yes, you can use them as a tool for brainstorming.
Okay, so but do you recommend, sometimes I know like students, they probably have two topics at the same time, so maybe they will eventually develop two version personal statement. Do you recommend doing that, or like what's the potential risk?
I don't, although you know what, I'm seeing that quite a lot, that people have, you know, several different options and they've actually written them out. I don't recommend it just because it's so time consuming. And especially now that school is in session, you know, students are really not going to have time to write more than one version. And to be honest, when students send me two possible essays and they've already written them both, and this happens quite often, there's inevitably one that's clearly better. And I've actually had many cases where people have sent me two, and they've spent way more time on the essay that turns out to be the one they should not be writing about. And I could have saved them so much time if they had said to me at the beginning, okay, here are the two things I'm thinking about. Because one of them was like much better a topic than the other one. So I think it's better if you are debating between more than one topic, get some input from somebody else to tell you which one to pursue, so that you will not have to waste time writing two versions.
Okay, cool. So the next question, what you should avoid talking about in a college essay, such as the sports, you know, your relatives, you know, passed away, you know, maybe something, you know, the pitfalls, like they should not, you know, they should avoid.
Yes, those are, I mentioned a couple of these in the personal statement webinar too. There are definitely topics that are difficult to write about, and sports is often one of them. You know, you know, taking a trip to a foreign country where you were exposed to people who are not as well off as you, and you learn to appreciate, you know, different cultures, or that not everybody has as many things as you. Yet the basic rule of thumb is that if some other student could write an essay that's similar to the one that you're thinking of writing, then that's not the essay you should be writing. You want to write something that is really unique to you. And the problem with, it's possible to write a unique sports essay, but it's hard, and most students won't have an experience that would lend itself to writing a unique one. So you really have to think about whether the topic you're thinking about is going to be specific to you. And if it's not, then find something that is. Because if it's an essay that somebody else could have written, then it's not helping the admissions officers really get to know you.
Okay, so the next question. So are college using your community essay to gauge students' diversity score? Or how should the Asian students approach this? Because earlier, like Harvard changed the supplemental.
Yes, they all did. So the bottom line is that they're not allowed now to consider a student's race just on the basis of that. They can't give anybody a bonus or a score because they're an underrepresented or overrepresented minority. So they can't do that anymore. So what they want to know, but you are allowed to talk about your experience and how your identity has impacted you. So if you have been, feel like you've had to face discrimination or misunderstanding, or you've been, a small minority surrounded by some other group, and that's had an impact on you, and that's sort of shaped the way you look at the world, then you can certainly write about those things. I don't think, and to be honest, for a lot of students, I don't think you should spend too much time thinking about it. It's probably impossible to hide your identity or to hide your race and ethnicity or whatever. They're going to know these things. I don't know that it's going to help or hurt. The biggest hurdle that Asian students have faced, and this came out in the court case that the Supreme Court was talking about, is that Asian students tended to get lower marks on the colleges on the personality score. They had great test scores and grades and all these other things, but where they would get marked down was personality. So they were seeming like professional students. And I don't know that, I think there may still be some of that bias out there. So I feel like it's particularly important for Asian students to make sure that they don't come across as professional students, that they have some interests outside, things that they wouldn't put on a resume, things that their parents wouldn't brag about. You know, they have to show that they do something else other than study, and that they have some, you know, other interests. So I feel like the essays are particularly important to show some of that personality, and maybe it's even more important for the Asian students to find things that aren't necessarily achievement-oriented essay topics, like not necessarily focusing on the things that their parents would want to brag about.
Okay, so the last question regarding the essays, somebody asked like any suggestion for the essays for the graduate schools. I know it's not a main topic today, but maybe you can still, you know, chip in a little bit.
Graduate school essays are a little bit different, and I feel like for the college personal statement, there's definitely a desire to be a bit on the creative side and to use anecdotes and things like that. For graduate school, I think it's more important to be direct. It's not the place, unless you're applying to a creative writing program. For my students who are applying to graduate programs, I don't like them to try to write creatively. That makes you seem a bit more immature. I want them to show a little bit more sophisticated and mature approach. So it involves more directly answering the question, showcasing some knowledge. And it's not that they need to make it sound like an academic essay, but it's more straightforward. Like if you were going to have an information interview with somebody to learn about a company for a job, more like that. They want to show that they're knowledgeable and that they have some goals in this particular area. But it's not, and they can show why and explain things, and they can show their passion, but without the creative writing pieces that will make them seem immature.
Yeah, I mute myself. Okay, so we address the last question, and then we probably can give time for parents and students to raise their hand, and
sure.
Then we'll unmute you, and you can directly answer, ask the questions. So the last question, Arienne, like you just mentioned that common app essays, like you should not just talk about or focus on the student's achievement because it's already maybe reflected in your activity list. Should it be more about student as a person? I think the answer is yes and no.
Oh, absolutely. The Common App essay is not the place to brag about your accomplishments. It's the place to tell admissions officers what kind of person you are and why you would be, you know, so they can imagine what you'll be like on campus, show that you're interesting and multidimensional. Yeah, it's definitely does not work to try and be, you know, rehashing your achievements and awards or anything like that. It's not effective and it's not memorable. And that's already, if you have things that you've done that you want to brag about, the place to do that is in the letters of recommendation. Have somebody else do the bragging for you. It's way more effective.
Okay, so for example, if some students, they already did you know, a research, maybe a great research or get published somewhere, right? So do you think like they can also write about that in their personal essay, or maybe just, you know, just mention it a little bit, or do you think that's not a good idea?
If somebody has actually published research, they will probably be able to submit the article or a link to it under like additional information. They may well want to use a letter of recommendation from the person who was supervising their research. It depending on what it is and what the topic of their personal statement is, it might be fit in and get mentioned, but I would not write the personal statement about that same thing, because you want to show, I mean, it might be related, but not about the specific research project, most likely. Because it will be there somewhere else. It's obviously important enough that you want it to be highlighted in your application, but that doesn't mean that it needs to be in the personal statement.
Okay. Okay, the last question from the chat box, okay? How to present that student as a person? I think that's a follow-up question to the previous question you just asked. So maybe can you give an example?
Sorry, can you?
Yeah, so basically the Stella asks like how you actually describe or maybe present this student's personality in the personal statement. I mean, do you have any some examples maybe from your
the way that I want them to show their personality?
Yes.
Okay, so the bits, when I'm reading student essays, the first thing that I'll, one of the things I'll often point out to them is to take out all of the sort of academic sounding language. If their essay has things like moreover and thus and therefore and all of those kinds of words that you would use in your essays for school, those don't belong in an application essay because it doesn't sound like their authentic voice. So we want to remove the things that make them sound too stuffy and formal. And then what I highlight is anytime a student has actually written something that has a bit of personality, it's usually something that they wrote in a more casual voice. So, some expression that they might use when they were talking to their friends, or something that's more natural. And I'll say, yes, like this shows some personality. Or they might say something that has a little bit of humor. And that's good if that's who they are. So those little touches where it doesn't have to be like everywhere, but just little comments in the writing sometimes show personality or how you viewed something. It's not that it has to be everywhere in there, but I feel like if the students write it in a more casual way, as if they were writing to a friend or a cousin or someone like that, they're more likely to use a voice that will show their personality. And some of it also may be in the specific things they say. For instance, so some of it is the writing style, and some of it is, they might be talking about their favorite rap artist, or some particular dance that they've learned, or it might be something that they do that's kind of quirky and unusual that shows some personality. Or maybe they have, weird habits or rituals that show their personality. So you want to try and capture some of those. It's hard to generalize because it really depends so much on the particular student. But everybody has something, and they have to think about those things that show some personality and that show who they are. Like, how does the student like to express themselves? Do they, is it something, do they do their hair a particular way? Is there something about the way they dress or the music they listen to or the way they organize their time? People have, they could ask their friends, what character traits do their friends associate with them?
Okay. So do you think actually, like reading other people's personal statements, because you can find tons of them online, right? This essay got me into this school, that essay got me into that school. Do you think actually reading those type of essays actually will help?
I think it probably hurts more than helps, because it puts more pressure on the students. And it often makes them think, oh, okay, I have to write it this way. Like, this is the style that we need. And there is no right answer. There's no right essay. There's no right style. The point is to be true to who you both in the style that you're writing it and the content, and it's just too hard to generalize. And I feel like that when students read too many of these, they often end up sounding the same. So I get so many essays from students where I can tell that they've all read the same sorts of samples because they all have the same kind of anecdote start, and they all use some of the same phrasing, and it gets boring. I'd rather that the person actually, wrote what's true to them. So, I mean, I guess if you're super stuck in coming up with ideas, but even then, I think, there's probably better ways to brainstorm. And I think it just adds to the pressure.
Okay, cool. So, so I think we will end the webinar at 10:30. So we still have 15 minutes, and let's just give the opportunities to people who raise their hand, and then I will unmute you so you can directly, and ask questions. Okay. So anybody that you guys want to raise their hand? Let me see. Linda. I'm not sure if Linda, because I saw you raise your hand for a long time, so I'm not sure if you just accidentally raise it or. Hi, Linda. Hello, Linda. So maybe you just accidentally.
Is she still muted?
Yeah, I unmute her.
Sure.
So okay, let's the next one. Okay, 彩虹李呀，彩虹李彩虹，Hi, 李彩虹, you can ask the question. Hello, 李彩虹。Hello, 彩虹. We cannot hear you, so we will jump to the next. Okay, 彩虹, we cannot hear you. Okay. Okay. Wendy.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. So I thought I because the beginning the voice is kind of on and off. I didn't quite get. So when even undecided, when I'm writing this supplemental for major, I still need to pick one, right? And I didn't get that. It's saying that you shouldn't give a job or whatever for the reason you want to take that major.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the first bit, for the undecided, yes. Even if you're undecided, I think you need to pick the one or two things you're most interested in that you might want to major in, because you need to give them some direction. You need the admissions officers, and I'm sure nobody is equally interested in all, 20 or 40 or 50 or 100 majors they have at whatever college it is. So pick one or two that are most interesting to you, and write about those. Yes, I don't think, although it's understandable that people are concerned about job opportunities, that's not a good reason to say that that's when you want to major in something because of that. It's just not going to be persuasive. That it's going to be a lucrative career or there are going to be lots of job opportunities. Instead, explain it, because there are quite a few things that have good job opportunities or good salaries. So why this particular thing? There must be some reason that somebody wants to go into medicine and not law or business, or computer science instead of research science. Find some reasons other than job security and salary.
Got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next one, John J. Zhang, and then it's
JJ Zhang. You can just call me JJ. Yeah, okay. My son is very interested in engineering. So I want to ask, what is your experience in helping students who are interested in engineering major?
Well, my son just started in an engineering program, so that was that's definitely something I've given some thought to. With engineering, you do at most colleges, engineering is an entirely separate school. So students who are thinking of going into that usually have to decide right away, and they can't choose that major later. So that's something that if students are interested in, they have to decide from the beginning. Computer science is kind of like that as well, and some other fields.
Okay, yeah, he's definitely interested in engineering since like a little child, but in high school, he's very fond of aerospace. So yeah, is that like something you need to decide early as well?
At most colleges, they don't need to choose the particular branch of engineering that they're going to go into. But if he's interested in aerospace, not every engineering program is going to have a lot in that. So, I mean, he would want to try and choose a program that has enough offerings in that particular area. And that may, that may cut down on the number of schools.
Okay. And he also wants to be enrolled in the ROTC program. So that would just further eliminate his choices.
Okay,
right?
well, but that's not a bad thing because there are so many colleges. So if he's looking at aerospace engineering and ROTC, and he finds the colleges that have both of those, then it should be down to a manageable number of schools that are actually like really good options for him. And sometimes it's better to, if it's better to have a, let's say 10 great options than 50 that you have to sort through. Sometimes a smaller pool is easier to manage and to keep track of.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, but his GPA is not so great right now, and he's in 11th grade. Yeah, and he's so sure about aerospace, so I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, sometimes in terms of GPA, I think people should look at the actual, there's a website, niche.com, NICHE.com, that they have great little charts where they'll show you, there's, a dot for each combination of an applicant's GPA and test scores and whether those people got in and didn't. As long as his GPA and test scores are in the range for accepted students, then that's fine. Sometimes parents get, overly concerned because there are maybe other students who have even higher GPAs. It's, there are lots of things that go into the mix, and there are lots of great colleges. So just because his GPA might not be quite as high as someone else's doesn't mean he's not going to be able to pursue this and go into the kind of program that he wants to go into.
Okay.
Okay,
let's jump to next.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
玉堂江玉桃
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Mrs. Noble. I would like to take the chance to ask you, so you are helping students do the application for the college and the university. Do you help the kids, like in high school kids, they have some like a summer program, or they have some summer school need to do the application, like sort of, same process of the application. So do you help the kids for that? And do you help?
I help students with all sorts of applications. So students who are applying to competitive summer programs where they need to write essays, I help with those too. It's the same process. Application essays are application essays. So yes.
Yeah. And do you want to take some minutes to give some I'm assuming that those type of application essays or answer the question, I'm assuming it should be like the additional, like the topic we have a topic today. You are not supposed to like doing those creativity thing like the personal statement. That's my understanding. Can you?
Yeah, I think that the majority of the questions that they're going to ask will be direct questions that are more like the supplemental essays. This is also like the whole thing with creative writing touches and anecdotes and things in personal statements. It's sort of a trend that's kind of snowballed that, I guess it was successful for some people, and then those ones got posted online. So a whole bunch of other students, everyone started copying that. But it's not necessary. And certainly for a lot of the programs where they have specific questions, it's much more important to answer them. Like, again, unless you're applying to a creative writing program, they're not looking for creative writing, right? They wanted to know the answers to their questions, and they want to know other things about the particular student. So it's not necessary to do all that.
Yeah, and maybe too much bragging is not good. But you have to tell them what you have the experience, let them know you like a word or anything.
Okay, bragging in general is not great in essays, and it's difficult to get just the right tone because sometimes you want to explain what you did, but do it in a way that doesn't sound like you're bragging. In terms of like summer program essays, it really depends also on what else is in the application. As I said a few minutes ago, I mean, for bragging, and I think there are usually letters of recommendation for a lot of these summer programs as well. The best place to put the bragging is a letter of recommendation, because it's much better to have your teacher or mentor brag about you than for you to brag about yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Arienne, so basically, it's like don't tell me, show me, right? So normally just that's the general idea, like, or maybe the logic behind the application. Just don't tell me what you do, but actually it can actually show from your whole package.
Yeah, the whole package needs to. I do have to say though, like for the supplemental essays, there is more telling involved, especially anytime an essay is that short, like 350 words or less. You don't have time for all the showing. You sometimes, you have to tell them. But what a lot of schools want to see is the reflection. You can tell them things, but you want to reflect on the things you're saying and say something insightful. The show don't tell is more applicable to the personal statement than to these other kinds of essays.
Okay. Okay. Actually, this question I really want to, actually mention for the double major. So for students who have not decided the major to do, or what's your suggestion? Or maybe for people who are interested in double majors, or for, like how they write their why major essay.
Okay, there are a couple of things to say about it. If somebody is actually interested in a double major, that's something they need to consider carefully in their choice of colleges as well, because there are some schools that are much more enthusiastic and much more amenable to having people have multiple majors. For instance, Northwestern, fantastic school for students who have interdisciplinary interests and are interested in more than one major. But there are other schools where, for various reasons, it's just not going to be practical or possible to do certain majors, or you might not be able to like have a major across schools, like from, have a minor in business and a major in history. Some schools won't let you do that. So you definitely, if you're undecided, there's also a difference between undecided and liking things that are interdisciplinary. If you like two things and they kind of go together or they're totally separate, that's fine. you kind of need to think about that and how you're going to explain that. It may be that the two things you're interested in actually combine in an interesting way. It could be, economics and, some, I don't know, some other kind of scientific research, or they could be things that you can see how they connect, or they could be totally different. And you do want to have some sort of explanation for why these things are interesting to you. And they don't have to fit together. It could be two totally different things. It could be music performance and history or whatever. It's fine. And it's fine to be undecided, but you still want the admissions officers to understand where your interests lie in general. If you have two things that are totally unrelated, then you can explain each of them separately. If you feel like there's a common thread, or you actually would like to combine them in some way in your ultimate career, then you can explain that.
Okay.
But you don't just say you're undecided. That won't be a good answer.
Okay. So, the last one, Han Chao. Ham, H-A-H-M. You allowed to talk.
It says here I misclicked or something.
Oh, okay, cool. So we jump to the next one. Selena. Hi, Selena.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, hi. Yeah, I have some question. I have a average student here and in 10th grade, and he has no sports or piano, things like that, math. He has nothing like that. I just wonder, anything else he can do to help him build a better resume, because right now he's 10th grade and do not have a long time to prepare for the the last year for the application thing like that. Yeah.
So for 10th grade students, I think it's a great time to actually encourage him to start thinking about what he is interested in. And maybe there isn't anything at school that's really capturing his interest. But I would make sure he has some time to think about, and ask him, what things are you interested in? And whether it's, something that he comes across from, news online or all sorts of things. It could be anything, but I think it's important to have him try and find something that he's genuinely interested in, and then he can start working on developing that interest and finding ways to learn more about it. And 10th grade, it's fine. He's got 2 years, and in 2 years' time, he could develop, a strong interest and expertise in something that he hasn't even thought about yet. But it's a great time for him to start thinking about what he is interested in.
Oh, okay.
So I encourage him to explore that.
Okay. Then right now he just got a part-time job, and I'm thinking can he do something like a volunteering and helping the community, helping the senior, or other stuff, or helping.
It never hurts to do that, but I would try and find whatever activities, find things that connect to something that he's interested in, because tons of students do, these sorts of general volunteering activities. But I would try and find something that fits with an area that he might be interested in pursuing more.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so go ahead.
Sorry. Is his PSAT will affect his future application in high school?
The PSAT? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
PSAT is not going to affect applications. They will not see that.
Okay, so the last one, the last answer, the question we will get from Lee Cai Hong. She switched to another new device, so I think she.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you. It's lots of information. My question is like for this year, some essay changed to like 250 words, you know, in such short essays, how you think can, you know, students reflect their, just like percentage wise, like, you know, how you lay out this 250 words, because it's short. It's a lot shorter than before.
I know it's very, a lot of these essays are extremely short. Fortunately, there are, I guess, are a lot of them. Students should, I mean, what I usually tell students is write your answer. And inevitably, when students send me a draft essay, they could say what they have to say in about half as much space. Students tend to repeat themselves a lot, and they tend to be very wordy. So, you know, if they're over by a significant amount on the first draft, that's okay. They just need to get somebody to help them cut it down and condense it. But what they really have to think about is like what they want to say, and then they're going to condense it and say it in the most succinct way that they can. And I know that's difficult for students. That's one of the reasons why I think they really need to steer clear of thinking of these as like creative writing activities. These, you really just have to answer the question on the supplementary essays. You need to answer it directly and not waste a lot of space on other things. I mean, it's a challenge. It's always harder to write short than to write long.
Yeah. How about the reflection part? Like, should be like 1/3 of it, or?
It's hard to generalize. It really depends on the particular prompt. I mean, I think it's good to always, you know, whatever the student is writing, it should show that they have thought about it and reflected on the particular topic. But I don't think it breaks down into like, you know, percentage or, you know, a third on this, a third on that. Particularly for the supplemental essays. On the personal statement, I know some people have like a, you know, basic rules of thumb, you know, on how much space should be used for different things. That's fine. And I don't think it has to be that way, but I can understand with the personal statement. For the supplemental essays, it's just not going to break down that way at all. There is not enough space. Most of the space will be taken up by just answering the question.
Okay.
But you want to do it in a thoughtful way. I did want to mention somebody had written in the comments, if you're a national merit, if you get a national merit, you're a finalist in the National Merit Scholarship Competition. Yes, that matters for sure. But other than being one of the top students, the PSAT is not going to make a difference.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we give the last one, the Hannah Pen. That's really the last one. Okay.
Okay.
So okay, Helen Pen.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Right.
Is that doable to request the reference to present a specific information about the students, such as the sports or the research? Can we request?
You mean the reference? You mean
yeah.
letter or?
Yeah, can a student ask the reference, say something about this aspect, specific aspect of the students?
You mean when they're asking for a letter of recommendation?
Yeah, can when we request the recommendation, can we ask the teacher, say, I need some information about this aspect? Can we ask that?
Oh, I see. Oh, okay.
You know, I think if you have a good relationship with the person you're asking to write the letter of recommendation, you certainly can do that. I mean, usually the person that you're going to ask would already be, you know, the person who's going to know about that thing. For instance, you know, if they've done research on something and you have their supervisor is going to write a letter of recommendation, it would be because they would know the student from that research, they're going to write about that. If they're a good athlete and you ask the coach, they're obviously going to write about that aspect. But sure, I think it's perfectly, if you know the person who's writing it well enough, I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, you know, it might be helpful, you know, if you could discuss this. But don't give them a long, if you give them a really long list of please say this, 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 and this about, you know, the student. If you give them too many directions, they're not gonna like that. I mean, there are actually, you know, some, maybe less so in the high school situation, but there are certainly situations where somebody will actually ask the student, this is more, I guess, at the college level, to write the recommendation themselves, which is worse in a way. I don't think at the high school level, the students will have to write most of them themselves, but you can certainly give a brief list of, you know, one or two things you would be helpful if they might mention, you know, or you could just ask. And then maybe the way to do it is this thing. Oh, you know, thank you for, you know, your willingness to write a recommendation for my son. You know, were you planning to mention blah, 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 blah. If you phrase it as a question, it doesn't sound so pushy.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Or do you think actually the AO, they will actually, or maybe the admission committee, they will reach out, you know, or ask a student to provide some reference? I don't think so, right? They don't have time to do that.
You mean beyond the letters of recommendation?
Yes, yes.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think they would be, well, I mean, unless they have something they were suspicious of, I don't think they would ever reach out to one of those people. I mean, there are schools where, you know, the guidance counselors will be making calls on behalf of their students, certainly in some of the, you know, private schools and things like that. And they might be mentioning things, but yeah, I don't think so. I think, you know, it'll need to be in the letter and make sure that they, you know, they cover the things that they should be covering. But if you choose the right people to write the letters of recommendation, you should be choosing the people that are going to say great things about that student.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I think let's, you know, wrap up today's webinar, and we will release the replay in our WeChat groups, or if you already, you know, add our WeChat assistant, or I can also leave my QR or my WeChat ID here, and if you want to add, you know, add me, and then later we will release the replay to you. So you can also add me if you want. Yeah, I'm the COO. I'm COO of the IvyCompass. So you can also reach out to me if you have any more questions regarding Arienne's package, regarding IvyCompass. You can always reach out to me. Okay. Thank you so much, Arienne. And
well, thank you, everyone. Good luck on your applications.
Yeah. So yeah, good luck with everyone. So and then I will still sharing the QR code for maybe another 1 minute, and then I will close the Zoom meeting. Okay. Okay, so
thank you, everyone.
Bye bye. Bye bye, Arienne. Yeah.
Thank you.